How are you doing today?
Doing good. Good morning to everyone. Good morning, participants. Welcome to our Eye Care Prevention Summit 2022. We're about to enter a session titled Helping Your Anxious Child, Parents' Do's and Don'ts. Our speaker calls Texas home and is a native of Florida. Our speaker graduated from LSU, completed degrees in zoology, oceanography, and business, which were used fulfilling a 20-year career as a marine biologist working on restoring Louisiana's wetlands, serving as a deacon of her church and a mental health counselor. May I present Mrs. Cheryl Broadnax.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. I really appreciate the invite and the opportunity to speak with everyone. The background may have sounded a little strange, like what does a marine biologist know about anxiety? And I would probably think the same thing. It was actually my first career. I went back to graduate school to pursue a master's in mental health counseling several years ago, and I've been working at Crossroads Professional Counseling Services, working primarily with children. So I work with children as young as 7 and as old as 95, mostly on the topic of anxiety. So I work almost exclusively with children that come in with anxiety. And it's really becoming a bit of a pandemic, if you will, of mental health issues. Recent research shows that roughly 1 in 3 Americans will experience clinical anxiety at some time in their life. That's pretty significant. So this is a topic that has affected most people I know. It's affected my own home, and hopefully this is something that you will benefit from as well, should you have your own anxious child in your own home. My hope is to go maybe about 40 minutes and just going through these slides and giving you a background on anxiety, what it is, what it isn't, what it might look like in your child, strategies that have been supported by research that can help treat anxiety, and then just what we can do as parents. I have a couple teenage kids at home myself, so some of these things I'm very close to, as well as just working with my own clients and then just looking through the research as well of what parenting do's and don'ts can go a long way to help calm the anxiety that may be in your home or among your children. I would really appreciate any sort of comments. Please feel free to interject as you go. I'll be looking at the comment box and stopping when I can to answer your questions. My hope is that this can be somewhat interactive and that we can save time at the end to talk about specific questions or just the experiences that you have that we can give specific attention to. Okay, so let's go. Okay, so what is anxiety? Most of us, I would imagine, have probably experienced some level of anxiety at some point in our lives. Basically, it's the body's reaction to stress and fear. It is a feeling of fear about what could happen or what's going to happen or what may not happen or how can I control something from happening. Anxiety may show up in a variety of different ways. It may wake us up at the 3 a.m., 4 a.m. time of the day, where our thoughts are just racing about a feeling of impending disaster of sorts. So anxiety will cause us to dwell on worst case scenarios, the absolute worst that can happen. Our anxious mind will focus more on what could happen instead of what's more likely to happen, what's more probable that could happen. So this can give us a feeling of apprehension, and it can show up in a variety of different ways about new things, new experiences, the unknown, our future. It can be about people, social anxiety, Or in our children, it can be a feeling of fear every time the parent or the caregiver goes away. That's known as separation anxiety. Or performance-based fear. What if I fail? What if I'm a failure? What if I make a huge fool of myself? I probably could feel some of that right now just in giving this presentation of, oh goodness, what's the worst that can happen? This could be a disaster. So those are some of the examples of anxiety and how it can affect us. So in our bodies, well, before I get to there, so there's a difference between feeling anxious and having anxiety. So clinically, having an anxiety disorder is when we have extreme anxiousness that lasts 6 months or more, and it really impedes our ability to function normally. It may impede our ability to go to school, to do our work, to get out of bed, to go anywhere, to leave the house, to go into a room of strangers, to go someplace new at all. So that's what I mean about impeding our functionality, where it is significantly deteriorating our quality of life. So there are different types. Hold on 1 second. Make sure I'm advancing this. Okay, so there are different types of anxieties. There can be general anxiety where there may not be a specific exhibiting of symptoms. It may not have anything to do specifically with a phobia or going someplace new or being separated from a loved one or being afraid of making friends or going to new places. It's just a generalized anxiety. There are different types of anxieties that are more specific, as I just discussed, separation anxiety, where children just refuse to be apart from their caregiver. If they do, they go into a significant expression of distress. Social anxieties, a lot of our older kids, our teenagers, being afraid of not being liked. Maybe they're being bullied. They don't want to go to school. They say they don't have any friends, and they really just have issues getting outside of their known and safe environment. Last type of anxiety is phobia. It's attached to something specific, a fear of spiders, a fear of elevators, a fear of germs, a fear of being alone, a fear of going to bed at night. These are certain types of phobias that are very specific, and the target is not necessarily the issue. It's not that spiders are the issue. The issue is that there's an underlying roots of fear, lack of confidence, and uncertainty that just happens to be attaching to a specific target. Okay. So panic attacks. Panic attacks is basically anxiety on steroids. It's when the body has a major physical reaction to the feelings of fear or stress. Panic attack disorder is, again, when this happens for 6 months or more, and there's more of a fear of a panic attack happening than the actual panic attack happening. So that's what would be considered a panic attack disorder. And lastly, obsessive compulsive disorder, or OCD. I'm sure y'all probably heard of that. Some people make jokes of, oh, that's just my OCD. So there can be OCD tendencies of rituals, intrusive thoughts, and compulsions that may not rise to the level of being called a disorder. So OCD disorder is when, again, it really impedes the functionality of your life, the quality of your life. It's intruding in ways that you can't get normal things done because of all these rituals and patterns. So OCD is really an offshoot of anxiety. It's a form of anxiety. When our mind is anxious and it continues to be anxious for a long time about more and more things, our mind is looking for a way to help us out. Our mind is looking for a, you don't have control over all these things that you're anxious about, so let's control this thing. Let's control how you have everything arranged, or how many times you turn the light on and off, or how you have things situated around you that give you comfort. And if you didn't have those things, then it becomes this obsessive thinking that something terrible is going to happen. Someone you love is going to die, or the world's going to end, or you're going to get sick. That compels us to want to keep doing those rituals. So that's what we consider OCD disorder. Okay, so in our bodies, Anxiety is going to show up in a variety of different ways that some people may not even know is anxiety. There are a lot of anxious kids that come in that I've seen that are convinced that something is horribly wrong with them, that they're dying, they have a tumor, they have something terribly physically wrong with them. It's really anxiety. Of course, notwithstanding you needing to get medically checked out, make sure there isn't anything truly wrong. It's typically anxiety, and I'll explain why in a moment. But what it may show up as is headache, stomach ache, nervousness, sleeplessness, a lot of fidgeting, of course, and moving their hands, biting their nails, a lot of rocking back and forth, tapping, can't sit still. That's just anxious energy in your body. Some have reported that it's hard to breathe. Like, oh God, something just heavy is just sitting on my chest, and I can't get a good breath. So it could show up as some of these other symptoms as well, like needing to use the bathroom frequently. Let's see. A sense of anger and irritability, butterflies in your stomach, tense, a lot of tension. Some people may wake up with sore jaws. That there's just there's a clenching that makes everything just kind of hurt. I know a lot of parents who have talked about their children calling them from school, terrible headache, horrible headache, I got to go home, or my stomach hurts so bad, I think I'm going to throw up. So again, unless there's a bug going around, this is likely anxiety showing up. Okay. So what anxiety does to our brain, this is why we're having all of these physical reactions when we're feeling anxious. So I'll try to pare this down. I don't want to get too biologically nerdy on this. But what basically happens is that our front part of our brain perceives a threat. There's a danger, either mortal harm if you're having a major anxiety or a panic attack, or just, this isn't going to go well for me. So our brain, again, wanting to help us out, tells the other part of our brain, the amygdala, which is an almond-shaped part of our brain, all right, go to work, you're on. So the amygdala's job is not to interpret whether there truly is a real threat or not. The amygdala's job is to release hormones, the stress hormones. You've probably heard what these are: cortisol, adrenaline. I'm sure you've heard of those. Floods our body. And again, there's varying degrees on just how much our body is flooded. If it's a big threat and someone, God forbid, is holding a gun to our head, then of course we're going to be flooded with these chemicals, because the job of the chemicals is to amp our body up to prepare to fight for our lives or flight, run for our lives. So we need the extra energy. And so that's cruising through our bodies. In a panic attack, it's a lot of chemicals, which is why our bodies have the physical response we saw on the other slide. Our stomach contracts, it hurts. Our brain is inflamed, it's pounding, it hurts. Our blood pressure is up, so everything feels like we're going to die. You can't breathe, shaky, cold sweats. So it takes about 15 to 20 minutes for the chemicals to burn off, for them to be metabolized. So if anyone's had a panic attack, it's about 15 to 20 minutes to ride that wave. You know, there's things that we can do to try to slow that down, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. But if our child is really having this type of response, it's scary. It's scary for an adult to have this type of response. So it's important to help our kids and ourselves to understand what's going on. Now, if it's not a panic attack and it's a smaller amount of stress, our body is still releasing these hormones, which is why if our stress level's normally right here, but something happens, whether it's just life or something significant, our stress level comes up higher. So our amygdala is going to respond in kind and is going to give us an extra measure of these hormones, because again, it's self-preservation. It's like, I don't know what you got to do, but I'm going to give you enough energy to get out of this situation. Avoid, do something to get out of it. So as you can see on the bottom part of the slide, the do something is some of the ways that we cope with our anxiety, some more productive than others. So it could be avoidance, a big reaction of stay up all night. It could be a shutdown. I'm just shutting down. I just can't. I'm just going to space out. It could be using substances, whatever is going to help our brain think that it's in control, that it's okay. The only problem is that when we do these things, we're telling the front part of our brain that first thought something was dangerous, that it was right. Oh, wow, I had it right. This truly was dangerous. I'm going to remember this. And next time I sense the same thing, I'm going to trigger the same response. So it's important as we move along to look at the coping skills, to see what is truly our reaction to this. Are we just avoiding our fears? Are we kind of glossing over them? Are we stuffing them down, hoping they'll go away? Are we using substances to temporarily feel better? That's the exact opposite of what we need to do, even though it gives us temporary relief. What we really need to do is to retrain the front part of our brain to not perceive a danger out of context. If it's a real danger, then yes, thank God we were given, the ability to have this type of reaction to save ourselves. But if it's an overreaction, then our brain needs to learn that through a feedback process of, wow, I overreacted to that. Going into a classroom with a bunch of kids I don't know was an overreaction. Was it uncomfortable? Yes. Was it dangerous? No. I didn't need my brain to react the way it did. So that takes a different type of practice, to have different types of coping skills, to retrain the mind to see fear differently. Okay, so causes of anxiety disorder. I really want to take a second to differentiate between just regular anxiousness and anxiety disorder. A lot of people say, oh, that's just my anxiety. Well, the more you tell yourself that, the more you're going to start to believe you actually have an anxiety disorder. When you just may be anxious, life may be a little more stressful right now. We may be in a season where everyone's background stress rate is a bit higher than it might have been a few years ago. So it's one thing to say, I'm feeling really stressed and my body's feeling it, or I'm feeling anxious right now, than to say, oh, I have anxiety. So the threshold for an actual anxiety disorder is what I talked about a few slides ago. It's quite a bit higher than just going through seasons of feeling anxious. So to me, it's important to call it what it is. Otherwise, we're going to normalize the concept of disorder, which in and of itself may feel defeating to our children who think, oh, well, this is just what it is and everyone just needs to accept it. Well, yes, of course, there's a level of acceptance and empathy that's necessary, but to admit defeat before you've even really addressed the issues isn't going to help anybody. So the causes of an actual anxiety disorder, the research isn't very conclusive on this. Likely it's a combination of a variety of factors. So of course, as with anything in our body, genetics may be involved. There may be a passing down of certain genetic code that may affect the chemistry in our brains. So it's certainly possible. Brain chemistry. So a lot of y'all probably have heard of serotonin. That's a chemical in our brains. It's a transmitter that has a significant effect on mood. So for anyone who may go on an SSRI type mental health pharmaceutical, it's to help to control the uptake and the release of serotonin in their brain. And that just relates to depression, anxiety, and other types of mood disorders. So of course, brain chemistry could be involved. It could be more of an organic problem than a nature problem than a nurture problem. Another type of anxiety can be trauma. So it's probably a no-brainer. If something really scary, really traumatic happens in your life, you're going to have a fear about it. If it's a significant event, you may even have PTSD. So that's just a high level of trauma. It's a type of anxiety that is mostly connected to an event or prolonged events that have been traumatic. The fourth cause is what I see more often than not, and that's the environment. It's what have the kids been modeled? What have they grown up doing? What have they grown up seeing? Our kids model what they see. That's how they learn language. It's how they learn patterns of behavior. It's how our kids learn how to handle stress by watching what we do and how we handle stress. And I have to remind myself of that a lot with kids at home. I'm thinking if I don't want them to overreact, well, I can't overreact either. I have to have a handle on my own anxiety. So environment does matter. Modeling does matter. Our parenting does matter. If there's kids coming in with a lot of anxiety, more times than not in my experience, someone else in their house is struggling with anxiety as well, who may have also had parents who struggled with anxiety as well. So there is a bit of a generational thing going on where we kind of do what we see, we do what we learn. Okay, so let's see. As I said before, anxiety is really taking off. It may just be a sign of the times. It may be more awareness, more open discussion and dialoguing about anxiety, but recent research has somewhere between 7 to 8+% of kids between 3 to 17 have diagnosed anxiety. That's a lot. That is a lot. Okay. So treatment, what can we do about this? There are several things that we can do about it. Of course, the first one that comes to mind is anti-anxiety medication. There's a growing number of kids who are starting on psychotropic, which is just mental health medication earlier and earlier and earlier. And I don't have a strong opinion on that one way or the other. Typically, I don't jump to the concept of anti-anxiety medication unless it rises to the level that I've talked about before, where functionality is seriously impeded, anxiety is starting to turn into depression. The child is having trouble even getting out of bed to go to school, and if they do, they're having trouble focusing on their schoolwork. So medication can help. It's a tool. It's a tool in the toolbox, and there's many different types of anxiety medication. So if this is your child, then I would certainly advocate for a meeting with their doctor, to talk with a pediatrician who may or may not recommend an evaluation with a psychiatrist or a child psychologist. You can evaluate them for the need and the type of medication that can be right for them. The second treatment is coping skills. There's never going to be an obliteration of anxiety. It's like the flu. We're not going to be able to get rid of it. There's going to be seasons in life where we feel more anxious than not. So learning coping skills is important. And then, of course, counseling. Research really supports for clinically diagnosed anxiety a combination of anti-anxiety medication and counseling. A lot of people will come to my office and say, can you just prescribe me something for it? And my answer is no. I'm a PLPC. I can't prescribe anything, but I can give you a referral. However, the medication is meant to handle the brain chemistry piece of it. So if your brain chemistry is, if you weren't born with a brain chemistry issue and the brain chemistry is not really that off, then anti-anxiety medication is just going to take the edge off of the anxiety. It's not going to bring it way down to where you're feeling fantastic. So it's really a combination of medication and counseling, because the role of the counselor is to help teach the coping skills and to help the child and the parents, by extension, try to get to the root of the anxiety, try to figure out why are they catastrophizing all of their thoughts. Why are they jumping to worst case scenario? What happened that may have been traumatic that just ingrained this fear into them that we need to work through? Medication, as good as it is and helpful as it is, it's not a cure-all. So having a combination of the two is what research has shown to have the greatest chance for long-term success. Okay, so moving down to coping skills. And I'm so sorry, I have to toggle back and forth between being able to see the room as then going back and managing my slides. I'm sorry if I've missed a couple of bullet points on my slides going back and forth. But moving on to coping skills, these probably are very intuitive. They're not a cure-all, but it is a way to calm down the fight or flight response. When our hormones are going like mad, our bodies feel out of control, especially for a kid. They're emotionally driven. They are not, they don't know what to do. And when their brain has been kind of hijacked by anxiety or a panic attack, the last thing they're going to think about is, oh, yeah, that's right, I got some coping skills. Because they're not thinking very clearly. It's like when we're feeling highly anxious, we may just forget to breathe. We may forget to, like, wait a second, I have some skills. I've learned and have practiced some skills. Let's put them into play. So the time to learn coping skills isn't necessarily in the heat of the moment. It's beforehand, when you're feeling pretty okay, where you can remember to create good habits so they can be put into play when you need them. So exercise, good eating, good sleeping. I mean, this is the trifecta for any type of, better health. So whether it's anxiety or depression or any other type of stress, of course, self-care is going to be important. It's just important for our kids as it is for us. Exercise particularly, because when we're stressed, the amygdala is releasing these amp up hormones. We have extra energy. And it's hard when a kid is stuck in a seat all day in school to know what to do with that energy. So when they can exercise, it helps burn off that extra energy, and it helps burn off those stress hormones a little faster. So if they're at home and they're having a meltdown, of course, you need to try to get them calm first, but then also think through, all right, let's move our bodies. Let's move around and see if some exercise can help refocus our mind. And again, if it works for you as an adult, there's a good chance it's going to work for our kids too. Good sleep habits. An anxious mind is not benefited by scraps of sleep every night. This is probably more true of our older kids and teenagers who, somehow live on 3 hours of sleep a night, because that's going to put our brain in a bit of a survival mode. And that can more easily trigger the things that would cause us to be anxious or panicky. So having a well-rested brain is a brain that can think more coherently. Healthy diet. There's an absolute connection between nutrition and mood. Foods that inflame our bodies, like processed foods, sugar, sugary drinks, all this stuff just isn't good for us. There's a reason why, because it inflames our bodies, and there's a vagal nerve that connects our stomach to our brain, and that's why we're seeing headaches and stomach aches whenever we're anxious, and an unhealthy diet will just amplify that. Meditation. Some people have mixed opinions about this. I keep forgetting to show you the bullets. There we go. Okay. So meditation. This can look like a lot of different things. I am not a huge meditation person. I've tried yoga. I wish I could do it well, but I can't. So to each their own on this. But for a meditation, it can look like a lot of different things. It could be a calming word that, as we're practicing our breathing, it's just a calming word that they say to themselves. It could be, if they're faith-based, it could be a scripture verse that's been very calming and soothing. If they are good at painting pictures in their mind, there's one technique that I've used, and I know a lot of counselors have used it, and it's where you picture, you can either be sitting by a stream, and you can help paint the picture to your child of, the water is bubbling by, and, the leaves are, blowing down onto the stream, and you can visually imagine taking your worry and putting it on the leaf and watching the leaf go down the stream and away. So these are different types of meditation things that can help the anxious brain just start to recenter and start to be able to focus on something specific. Other types of meditation, there's something called five senses. Tell me, what do you see that's green? Or What do you smell? Just focus on your smelling. And with their eyes closed and they're breathing, they're just thinking about what they're experiencing in their different senses. What do you feel on your skin? What sounds do you hear? So meditation does not have to be complex. You can even come up with your own, knowing your child and knowing kind of what they picture their safe space to be, to picture them and help them picture in their mind's eye their safe space. Sometimes when my kids were younger, we'd lay on our backs in the yard and we would watch the clouds go by and we would picture our worries riding on the clouds as they would come in and out, because they never really last forever. Our fears and feelings typically move in and out. So it helps them recognize that whatever they're feeling isn't permanent. Okay, breathing. This is a big one. I know, again, it's so simple. Okay, breathe. We in and out. We do that all the time. There's a technique to breathing that can really help, especially if you feel a panic attack coming on. I've had to use this several times where I felt like I was at tilt mode and I needed to calm myself down quickly. And why it's important, and the technique is important, because it helps I guess it's maybe a parasympathetic system, if I'm getting that right, calm down. It helps our breathing regulate. It helps our heart rate regulate. It helps calm down the shaky feeling and the I can't breathe, I'm going to die type of panic. And it helps our lungs expand more fully so we can get a better breath of air. Okay, muscle relaxation. This is a technique that I show people when they come in just to help relieve the tension. So when you're stressed out, your body is going to tense up. Again, it's the fight or flight response. So we need to release that tension. So one way to do it is to even hypertense. Take what's already tense and make it tenser. And you hold it for about 5 to 6 seconds, and then you release it. So what you're doing is starting with your toes and working up slowly to each of the major muscle groups, tensing just that muscle group for about 5 to 6 seconds. Not so much that you're giving yourself a cramp, but just tensing it up, tightening it up, and then letting it go. And this is something that you don't realize how much tension you're carrying until you start to release it and your shoulders come down from the ears. You can breathe a little better. Again, it's a way to focus our thoughts that are all over the place towards something specific while getting rid of some of the acid and the things building up in our body that's causing us to be tense. Okay, so this is the technique for breathing. Just get rid of your regular breath. And when you breathe in, you're breathing in through your nose to the count of 4. You're going to hold it for a second or two, and then you're going to breathe out through your mouth slowly to the same count of 4, like you're blowing through a straw. You don't want to be all, that doesn't do anything. You're probably going to hyperventilate. So you want to breathe in slowly, hold it, breathe out slowly through your mouth. To a count of 4. Picture a straw in your mouth because it'll help you blow the air out slower. So again, simple. It's not rocket science, but it can really help an anxious situation from getting out of control. It's a good technique to do even when you're not feeling anxious. It's a good technique to, let me come back to there we go. Okay. It's a good technique to practice even when you feel like you don't need it. When you wake up, all right, let's do a couple cycles of deep breathing. When you're on the bus or you're in the car and you're going to school, before you walk in, maybe before a test comes, all right, just do a round or 2 of deep breathing. It'll help calm down the jitters and help refocus your brain because you're focusing on counting in your breath. So this is a great thing for parents too. It may be something that you even do together, that you just kind of practice together, because again, you want to have these skills practiced so they're ready when you need them. If you've never practiced them and your body doesn't know what to do, when we're having kind of an anxious freak out, it's not going to remember to do these things. So it's important to instill this at home as you can. Okay. How are we doing on time? Okay, I probably need to pick it up a little bit. So, okay, anti-coping skills. All right, we have probably seen these at home. Maybe we're even guilty of some of them ourselves. So, anxiety can really cause acting out, especially anger. Anger is hardly ever a primary emotion. It almost always masks fear or hurt. So, I mean, think about it. If somebody scares you, you may swing at them. It's anger. It's like, whoa, wait a second. I don't like feeling this way. My mind is perceiving a harm, and I got to fight. I got to fight my way through it. The other reasons why anger can show up is because kids just don't feel understood. Sometimes they're marginalized or invalidated, or what are you afraid about? That's so silly. That's so stupid. No, just go. You're going to be fine. So of course they're going to feel anger, like, listen to me. You don't hear me. So sometimes in the worst of cases, it shows up as self-harm or destructive behavior because they're tired of feeling so emotionally overwhelmed that this sounds counterintuitive. They'll cut themselves or hurt themselves to distract from feeling emotions. They'll rather feel physical hurt than emotional hurt. And this is the same for substance abuse. Anxious kids may take to vaping, take to drinking, taking to other vices that give them temporary relief. And then again, avoidance. Well, I'm just not going to go. If I feel nervous around hanging out with a new group of friends, I'm just not going to go. Or I'm not going to go to school, or I'm not going to go to the store or to someone's house. I'm just not. So again, what that's doing is reinforcing in the brain that, yeah, you shouldn't, because that's dangerous. So you should avoid. So avoidance is one of the worst things that we can do to really stem our anxiety. Okay. So once again, these are the different ways that anxiety may show up. And for a parent, it can be confusing. Why is my kid crying all the time? Do they have depression? Why can't they concentrate? Do they have ADHD? Are they lazy? Why are they can't sit still? Can you just control yourself? Well, if you have a bunch of hormones that are taking over your body, you really can't control yourself. Why are you acting out and so angry or negative and down? You're not eating, you're not sleeping, your grades are terrible. Why are you so clingy? Leave me alone, I'm busy. Go play, entertain yourself. So just keep in the back of your mind that this may be anxiety in disguise, and what they need is to really address it head on. So how do we do that? Okay. Oh, I'm trying to remember to do these bullet points. Okay, so cognitive behavioral therapy is just one technique. That's a theory that I use within my practice. There's gobs and gobs and gobs of research that supports CBT for anxiety and for depression, but it's by far not the only therapy technique that people can use. So what it's about is it is a method to treat anxiety in two parts. And you can probably guess the first one is cognitive, the second one's behavioral. So cognitive deals with the thoughts. That's something that medication isn't really going to be able to handle. And it's something that just behavioral tactics alone can't really get to, because the root of their fear is still going to be there. The way that they see themselves, the way that they perceive the safety of their environment. Just their own self-esteem and confidence is a big driver of anxiety. Maybe there was a trauma that happened. Maybe their brain has devised thoughts and tactics that really aren't the right thing to do, like avoid or some of these other bad coping mechanisms we've talked about. So the cognitive piece really gets to the thinking and the thoughts and the beliefs. The behavioral is the acting. What are they doing? What is their behavior? What's the fight or flight response? How can we interrupt that? And to relearn new ways of behaving, because the behavior will influence the thoughts will influence the behaviors. So the two really go together, which is why CBT is kind of a package deal. Okay, managing our thoughts. Okay, so as I said before, anxiety plays out the worst case scenario. I'm going to go to this party. I'm going to embarrass myself. It's going to be humiliating. No one's going to like me. I'm going to be a social pariah. I'm going to end up living and dying alone and live a horrible life. Yeah, okay. Well, that's a big scenario to play out for something as simple as, going to somebody's party. Or I am taking a test. I'm going to fail this test. I'm going to get an F. I'm going to not succeed in life. I'm not going to be able to get into a good school or a good job. I'm going to, be homeless with no money, and my life will be over. So these are just some of the examples of worst case scenario. And it sounds kind of silly of, wow, how did you get from here all the way to here? But the anxious mind does that, and it does it in a split second. We may not even know that we're doing those types of mental gymnastics of going from point A to Z without even thinking about it. But our mind works way fast, and our body reacts to it very quickly. So if some teacher says, okay, test tomorrow, our kids will immediately feel like this physical reaction. If they're struggling with anxiousness, anxiety, they're going to feel this immediate reaction because their mind already thought about the worst case scenario. So we need to interrupt the worst case scenario. So anxiety goes down when confidence and self-efficacy go up. So self-efficacy is just basically our belief in ourselves. It's we believe that we have the skills, the talent, the resources, the help that we need to figure out whatever comes our way that could make us feel scared. So it's belief in your ability and confidence. So of course, the more confident you're feeling, the more you think, yeah, I've got some grit. I've got things in my corner that can help me get through this. It's not going to be this huge disaster that my brain wants to tempt me to think. Then of course you're going to feel less anxious about it. My belief is that fear is just a God-given emotion that is necessary for self-preservation. Fear by itself is not bad. It helps us keep from doing stupid things. If we had no fear, then we wouldn't study for tests. If we didn't fear being fired, we wouldn't show up for work. If we had no fear of death, we would run into traffic and do ridiculous things. So there is such thing as a healthy fear because it motivates us to take action where we can take action, where we have some control over. So that's where we build our confidence and our self-efficacy to figure out, is there something in this situation that I actually can control? Well, yeah, I can study. I can, not go do this dangerous thing. I could take better care of myself. So that's part of building confidence and self-efficacy, that you can take some meaningful action to help curb your fears. And the stuff that you can't is a waste of energy, and it's fruitless anxiety. So that's part of the managing our thought process. Okay, and then lastly, some fears are real. This is where trauma comes in. Some fears are real. Bad things may have happened. There may be a real lack of security and safety in our kids' lives, and that does need to be worked through with trauma counselors, or with trying to improve the environment to create a better sense of safety and security. Maybe it's troubleshooting, contingency planning. If this were to happen again, what could we do to help mitigate that? So the kid starts to feel a little more empowered and a little more confident. Okay, so how are we doing on time? Okay, so the behavioral part of it is, hold on, PowerPoint back and forth. Here we go. Okay, so the behavioral part of it is leaning into the fears. There's a primary technique that, again, is well supported by research. This is what I do in my own practice. It's called exposure and response prevention. So what this is, I don't know if any of you have seen the movie What About Bob with Bill Murray. It's one of my favorites. It talks about a book called Baby Steps, and it's based on ERP. Baby steps is you take something you're very, very afraid of, and you slowly, baby step by step by step, graduate up into confronting that fear as a means of training your brain to no longer see it as an overreaction to danger. So if something is truly dangerous, then of course you need to be responsible with that. But if it's something like public speaking, talking in front of a group of people, riding an elevator. My son, when he was younger, he had this irrational fear of elevators. He would not get into an elevator. I worked with a client, a teenager in high school, who had a horrible social anxiety, could barely go to school, could barely walk into her classroom, would eat outside and not with friends, would not cross the cafeteria. So these are things that are impeding the quality of life. We're going to be called to do these things as we go along. So ERP is the baby steps of behaviorally stretching ourselves a tiny little challenge at a time until we have newfound confidence and newfound self-efficacy. So for the elevator, for a phobia, or spiders or blood or something like that, well, I won't use blood as an example, but spiders or elevators or other just phobias and fears, to be able to just even be able to talk about it. Sometimes that creates huge anxiety in kids just talking about what they're afraid of. So it may have to be in just little bites of time at a time, because you don't want to trigger a major panic attack. But the intention, the purpose, is to become intentionally uncomfortable, again, a little at a time, so the brain can learn that this is not a big fear. And we're conditioning our brain a little piece at a time to get used to that fear until it's not a fear anymore. Okay, and then secondly, positive reinforcement. Our kids really need to be encouraged. If they are working on anxiety, that's not easy. It's not easy for adults to work on anxiety. So positive reinforcement is, okay, you met these challenges. We set these baby challenges and you achieved them. So there should be a bit of a reward mentality. It doesn't have to be money or gifts or things like that, but certainly acknowledgement and encouragement and motivation, because that's going to fill their cup to want to take the next challenge on. Okay, so parenting tips. I'm going to wrap with parenting tips just to give a chance for some questions if there are any. Okay, empathy. This is the cardinal rule of counseling, and I've come to learn that it's the cardinal rule for parenting as well. Our kids need to feel understood. If they feel like their emotions are completely invalidated, I'm not saying empathy is sympathy or permission to have emotional freakouts or to act out poorly, but empathy is understanding. If our child comes to us and they're like, I'm scared, or they don't even say it, they just show it. Okay, empathy helps take some of the bite out of the fear. It's understanding, it's putting ourselves into their shoes. I can see how this would be scary, or, I don't understand, but I can see it really affects you and that you're really upset by it. Because once we feel understood, we're much more receptive to hearing feedback and tips back. If we aren't feeling understood and we're maybe even being shamed for feeling how we feel, we're going to entrench. We're going to be like, no, apparently I'm not getting this across, so I'm going to have to go even bigger in my behavior. And again, this may not be a conscious thing that our kids do, but they do it. And then it becomes this entrenchment where it's like, no, I have anxiety, this is anxiety, and you're just going to have to accept it. Empathy is more, well, yes, I see this is how you're feeling. Let's see if we can work through it, what that might look like. So that requires being a good listener. We cannot jump to finish their sentences, be dismissive, tell them we don't have time, be on the phone while they're trying to talk to us, all this stuff that we're parents, we get distracted. But being a good listener will help our kids become good talkers and good sharers. And that's what we want. Our kids are so emotionally driven. As parents, we become more logically driven. You want to teach a balance of both. You want to have a balance in the emotional brain and the logical brain. That requires communication. They have to be able to express and share what they're feeling, even if it seems completely illogical, because it's signaling that something's out of balance. It's signaling that something needs to be paid attention to. And then you, as a parent with a more fully formed frontal lobe and brain, can help them see some logic in it, but they have to feel that you get where they are first. Okay, this is a big one. I talked about modeling. Our kids are going to be anxious if they see us being anxious. And when we are anxious, it's important to recognize that and say, hey, you know what? Maybe I'm overreacting here. Maybe I'm really parenting with this heart of fear, and my fear is projecting on you. And now you're afraid to do things too. You don't trust your ability because all this time I've been talking about how I don't trust your ability. So that's one thing to really be mindful of is our own anxiety that might be bleeding out into the house. Okay, fight the urge to rescue or enable. Now, when our kids really need help, that's our job. We're their shepherds. We got to be there. But fighting every fight for them, rescuing every discomfort from them is not going to teach them how to get past their own fears and hurts and mistakes and worries. It's hard. To me, it's the hardest part of being a parent is watching our kids have to learn, even sometimes the hard way when we could have made it better for them. Well, making it better for them sometimes truncates the problem solving process that they're going to need to develop their belief in themselves to work through issues. We're not always going to be there for them. Help create confidence and positive self-talk. Again, if our kids are anxious, running them down, even if we don't intend to be running them down, is going to shoot a hole in their confidence, and they're going to start to believe that they aren't doing things right, they aren't doing things well. If there's a lot of kind of critical, talk in the home, they're going to internalize that as not being able. And if they're not able, they're going to feel paralyzed by any challenge that meets them in life. So teaching new skills is a good way to build confidence. Kids need to believe that they are getting prepared for the world, that they can go into something that's difficult, even if it's just for a few minutes, just to test the waters. Like little strides and challenges build confidence. And that means, again, not doing everything for our kids. They need to learn life skills. They need to be challenged because that is where their self-efficacy will come from. Okay, and then the last piece, encourage critical thinking. Anxiety is fear. It's an emotional response to fear. So again, there's not that logical piece to think, oh, is this an overreaction? Am I thinking more about what's possible instead of what's probable? Even if my worst case scenario did happen, I think I could probably get through it. I've got the skills to get through it. Critical thinking is to me, it's the cornerstone of adulthood, of trusting that you may not be able to solve every problem, but you have enough wherewithal to be able to work through the majority of it, to either help mitigate the chance of your fears happening or to be able to work through them if they do. So that's something you can teach at the young age of not giving them the answers, but helping them come to their own answers. So that is the end of the presentation part. I know we only have a handful of minutes, but I'm happy to take any questions.
So we do have a couple of questions, but they're all revolving around the slide presentation. So I just stuck it on the screen. So we asked a few people, they requesting your slides because they love it. You kept getting compliments about how attractive it looked. The diagrams were amazing to comprehend the information. So a few viewers would like to know, can they get a copy of your presentation?
Certainly, happy to.
So do you want them to email you or will you email this to Dr. Thornton?
What do you suggest is the best way to distribute?
If you don't mind them emailing you and you forward it to them, it's up to you, definitely.
Okay, certainly. So my email is, let's see if I can put it on the screen here. Okay. Y'all can see that?
Yes, ma'am. And I'm also placing it in the chat for them to have access to it in case they miss it. Okay, perfect. Any other questions, you guys? Feel free to stick it in the chat. Okay, well, Miss Cheryl, it has been a joy. I learned a lot of things from my own anxiety, so I greatly appreciate it. You have some folks saying thank you. It was a great presentation in the chat also. So once again, thank you, thank you, thank you. It was very informative.
Thank you. I appreciate the invite and being here, and I'm happy to answer any questions via email that you may have after the fact. So thanks.
Awesome. Thank you, guys.
Bye-bye.